Good morning, if those of you in Europe. Good afternoon for those of you. Sorry, I'll start again. I was told that I was muted, but I'm not. Hope you can all hear and see me. My name is Dharmendra Kanani. I'm Chief Operating Officer and Chief Spokesperson at Friends of Europe. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you, those of you, as I say, good morning in Europe, and good afternoon for those of you joining us from China. On a day, I wouldn't call it auspicious, but it's a day when the European Council are discussing economic security. And part of that strategy, the joint communication that's come out from the Commission, would suggest that we might have to think long and hard about how Europe and China and other regions cooperate on scientific research, knowledge sharing, and learning. Now, this conversation is billed as rewriting the rulebook on EU-China scientific cooperation. And I suppose the questions we have to ask ourselves as the bunch of men and women, and particularly men, mostly men, across the road at the council who are meeting this morning and the rest of today, are going to be asking, suddenly, is knowledge going to become weaponized? Is scientific research going to become weaponized? Are they, in this geopolitical context that we find ourselves in right now, what do we need to be thinking about to ensure that the gains that have been made over decades in terms of academic collaboration between the EU and China, the kind of joint research in terms of science and technology that has been a benefit and a gain to both regions will suddenly disappear because of geopolitical tensions, the fear that one party is stealing from the other for economic gain and perhaps for other ulterior motives. We don't know. But the questions we need to ask ourselves is that what needs to be saved in this dialogue? What kind of reason do we need to actually ensure is thought through and worked out so that we do not lose the gains of the past, but actually to reflect on our modern day circumstances and our long-term and medium future? We know that China is excelling the rest of the world in terms of patent technologies. We know that there's great advancements in a number of areas, in particular when we think about the solar cell. It's just been announced that now it's cheaper, faster, and better to get to market, and they're ahead of the game. How do we ensure that competition doesn't turn into rivalry and a sense of lack of trust between the regions? And let's not forget, globalization has assisted both regions tremendously. China and Europe have benefited significantly from their trade, bilateral relations, and the ability to ensure economic growth and prosperity for both regions. So now we find ourselves in this early part of the century where we know, in the context of geopolitical tensions, something might change quite significantly, and that the rule book of cooperation might be fundamentally written. How should those rules map out, and what should be in the rule book? So to join me, we have a fantastic cast of contributors from across both Europe and China. We have a commission person, we have someone from a think tank, we have people from business, etc., and those involved in the actual exchange of scientific research and knowledge. So it gives me the greatest pleasure first to welcome Maria Cristina. Maria, thank you for being with us. I know it's a busy day, given the council's meeting and given your role in the work that you do. You're Director for Global Approach and International Cooperation in R&I in the DG for Research and Innovation at the European Commission. So thank you for joining us, Maria Cristina. It's a great pleasure to have you with us. Now, what I've been saying, I hope you recognize, about the relationship between the two regions and how we have had mutual benefit and a sense of interdependency of how we make social progress happen. And suddenly there's a sense that social progress, knowledge sharing, might become weaponized or the source of geopolitical tensions. So can you share with us your thinking on, will this strategy help prevent the much dreaded decoupling of research activities at a time we need it more than ever? Maria Cristina, over to you.
Thank you so much, and good morning to those in Europe, good afternoon to those in China. I'm really very happy to be here in this important event of Friends of Europe and bring the European Commission's perspective, especially on the side of what we are doing in terms of research and innovation. On this important day, the day of the European Council, I would like to highlight that also many women are crossing the road in Rue de la Loi to enter in the European Council, including the President of the European Commission. So it's
Thank you for correcting me. Good.
Yes,
it's a sign of the times, which is very positive.
It's important. It's not only about men. It's a lot of women are there, including prime ministers, but especially our president. And for us, it's also a very important day for my work in my department in the Directorate-General for Research and Innovation, because today we will adopt the first implementation report on the global approach to research and innovation. The global approach to research and innovation, it is the European Union's strategy towards international cooperation in research and innovation, which was adopted by the European Commission 2 years ago, endorsed by the Parliament and by the Council of Ministers. And it's really important linked to this discussion, because in fact, I would like to say, and this will be the key words, the key message I want to pass on, that our approach toward China, it's a nuanced one. It's not like black and white or white and black. Let's say that it is certainly a relationship that we need to have, that we need to work with China. We need to work with China in the field of research and innovation, but we need to have the adequate framework conditions that make that this work is beneficial for China and for the European Union. Now, let me say that there is not here a sudden change of our relationship with China in terms of science and innovation, because I would like to make a step backwards, if you allow me to do that, which brings me in 2013, so 10 years ago, we have agreed with China, the then Commissioner, Mrs. Gerun Quinn, with the then Minister of Science and Technology in China, to work together in the framework of an innovation cooperation dialogue. This dialogue is to set the right framework conditions for bringing our cooperation to the level where we both have the benefits of that. That was in 2013. In 2019, back to back with the adoption of the European Commission strategy on China, which indeed, as you know, presented China both as a partner, but also as an economic competitor, we have launched the discussions in agreement with China, the European Union in agreement with China, on a roadmap for research and innovation cooperation. This roadmap is to put in place the right framework conditions that would allow to have an international cooperation which is, again, at the benefit of both parties. And since 2019, we are negotiating this roadmap with a success which is not the one that we would have expected, but certainly it reflects the overall state of relation between the EU and China. But just to be a bit more specific, when we speak about the framework conditions for cooperation in the roadmap, we refer to the intellectual property right, pre-normative research, open science, ethics, research ethics and integrity. We also touch upon important issues such as ICT, innovation and SMEs. And we have progressed in those discussions for those framework conditions which are more linked to the research cooperation and less to the innovation cooperation. Now, that is what we started to do in 2019. Then I mentioned the global approach to research and innovation, which was adopted in 2021. And again, in this strategy on international cooperation, we have really embedded this nuanced approach, which is for us to say we want to be as open as possible, as close as necessary, which with reference to China, we say we want to cooperate in an open way in those areas where we have a mutual interest and where we have the right framework conditions in place, but we want to have the instruments to be less open or being closed when it's necessary to protect our strategic autonomy. So just to say, this is important for me to say that it's not a sudden change, but it is a political movement that we have put in place, and the report on the global approach that will be adopted today will show that. I conclude with two elements which are concrete and that explain what I'm saying. Taking into account the state of the discussion on the roadmap on science and technology cooperation, taking into account the fact that we have advanced on those framework conditions related to research cooperation, we have been able to launch two specific flagships in two fields which are of the utmost importance for China and for us. In particular, in the field of food, agriculture, and nutrition, and in the field of climate change and biotechnology. And there we have launched two specific research actions for which both us and China have dedicated, climate change and biodiversity, not biotechnology. Biotechnology was linked with food and agriculture. We have launched two specific research flagship initiatives to which we have dedicated nearly 50 million of euros, and China has committed 18 million of euros for 2023 alone. And that was done through an administrative arrangement that I signed myself with China last year. So to show that we are continuing the cooperation in the fields where we both have an interest, whereas we've been able to use the instruments that we have to close, for example, the innovation actions in the research framework program to the Chinese participation, because we do believe that the framework conditions for cooperation and innovation are not reached the mature stage that would allow a cooperation based on mutual interest. Last point, we had yesterday what we call the multilateral dialogue on the values and principles for research and innovation, which we have set up within the context of the global approach strategy. It's a dialogue with all our partners at international level in order to agree on which are those important values and principles that we need to ensure in international cooperation in research. And China was very actively in this framework, sitting with us, with the United States, with Japan, with Latin American countries, African countries, in order to discuss that. So the point here is that our approach is nuanced. We continue to cooperate with China on the areas where we have interest, but of course we have put in place the measures to limit this cooperation where it is not in the interest of the European Union. And we are now, of course, analyzing the situation against the background of the European Economic Security Strategy that was adopted last week by the Commission and will be discussed at the European Council to see if something more needs to be done. But we have the instruments in place, and we want to continue a beneficial cooperation within the right framework conditions. That's the key message I wanted to pass.
Maria Cristina, thank you. That was very comprehensive, very useful. And it's useful for those who are, watching and listening, that what's happening today in the discussions of the Council is part of a longer trajectory, a longer development. It's been, over time, over a decade, that we've been witnessing from at least the policy objectives of the European Commission, the Council, that you're moving in this direction and has been for some time. But to the issue, there is a but. What is, we will be as close as we need to be and open as we need to be. What kind of clarity does that provide businesses, universities? Is there clarity? Is there guidance? Because to say that's not really quite enough, is it, for people to have stability, that sense of investment and surety? But when they don't know the rules of the game, how can they participate? So would you be able to say a little bit about what will be in the rules that actually say, this is where we're going to be closed, and this is where we're open?
Yes, thank you very much. I mean, this is very clear because we have our funding instrument for our research innovation policy, which is Horizon Europe. And Horizon Europe, which, by the way, is the biggest multilateral research innovation program of the world, is implemented through specific biannual work programs. And in the work programs of Horizon Europe, it is very clear where entities from China cannot participate, namely for some specific topics which relate to most sensitive technologies, linked to a precise provision of article of Horizon Europe, which is Article 22.5, which is not only designed towards China's entities, but it's a provision that restricts certain actions on issues like quantum, space, to only EU member states. So hence China and also other third countries cannot participate, but it is very clear spelled out in the work program. And then also there is another provision, which is Article 22.6 of Horizon Europe, which allows us to limit the participation of some entities to the innovation actions. And there, considering the non-progress on the roadmap, or maybe lack of progress, we have closed those actions to Chinese participation. And again, it is very clearly spelled out in the work program. So there is not a sense of uncertainty. It is very clear. And what I'm saying here, it's our policy line that we keep on exposing. Whereas I mentioned these two flagships on research cooperation that we have launched, and for that we have again in the work program specific calls which reflect those flagships and which invite the Chinese participation. So indeed there is clarity. Everything what I'm saying is reflected in the work program which implements Horizon Europe.
Maria Cristina, thank you very much. I'm going to move now to our next speaker, but I'm sure that there'll be a lot of interest in what you've just said and perhaps questions about the future direction and what will happen. I suppose in particular, the one question that will emerge in people's minds is that when you have a region, a country such as China, that is leapfrogging the world in terms of technology research and being able to move with pace in terms of scientific research and creating products to market, what would that say about economic sovereignty of Europe? And will it just be left behind as a result? Let's see. But I'm going to move to the Chinese Chamber of Commerce, to the EU. Linlin, very good to have you with us. And it's particularly good to have you with us on this day because you'll be able to share with us feelings, emotions, moods of Chinese companies working with European companies. First share with me and us, what's the mood around this regulation, this communication? What kind of impact is it having on confidence levels, but also trust in collaboration? Welcome and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's really indeed a good question. And if we ask us our feeling, of course, is mixed. But before I go in details about your questions, I would like to share my own experience in China. In just last month, I went back to China for the business trip in 1 week in Beijing, the capital city of China. And that was my first trip in 4 years. So you can imagine it was both familiar and alien to me.
Yeah.
But only until that time, I realized how technically advanced China has become. I want to bring something what's happening on the ground to our audience to see what's happening. So in China, I checked in the hotels with facial recognition and I paid all my bills via the mobile phones. Of course, it's not a big deal in Nordic countries. You can do that as a cashless society. But when I was sitting on the back seats of the taxis and I heard the navigation talk, it was amazing because it's different with the navigation you hear or elsewhere, the robotic, regular guiding voice about the routes. But in China, the navigation will tell you, look, watch out, be careful, because there's a white car just had an accident in front of you about 90 meters. Or it will tell you, oh, don't try to speed because there's a camera at the crossroad. Or exactly what the navigation will tell you, exactly how many seconds your traffic light next to you will turn green or red. It was just so amazing to me. It's a little bit surreal and futuristic if you understand, because this is a concept of Internet of the Things. It becomes a reality in China now. And if you know the background, back in 2015, China and Europe signed a partnership agreement to develop the IoT back in 2015. But now you see it's happening now in China. But what I want to stress, and which is also relevant to today's discussion, is that behind the sophisticated and well-connected navigation system in Beijing in China, it's actually a product of combination of China's Beidou satellite navigation and the GPS service from the United States. So it is a combination of the innovation and cooperation. And I believe that this is kind of cooperation between the China satellite navigation and Europe's gallery satellite navigation is under negotiation at the moment. But you see, it's just so amazing to see what's happening and how digital advanced China has been at the moment. So, I hope my audience in China is not laughing at me at the moment, because it could be very honorable for them. But I think it's important to bring our European audience this sense of this kind of what's happening on the ground. It's not about the political ideas or something else. It's about what's happening, what's innovation actually changing people's life on the ground. So, so from the business point of view, what we observe is what's happening on the street of Beijing. It's actually happening also in China's factories, in the manufacturing sector. You know, China imported the most industrial robots from Europe. And these automation and smart manufacturing are compensating for China's aging demographics. And also, I would like to emphasize another example. China is a perfect test bed for the European technology. And it has the potential, and it's turning the reality of the European economic advance. This concrete example is called, the magnetic levitation train. If you know, this is a special train driven by the two sets of magnets. It can reach a maximum speed of more than 400 kilometers per hour. And this technology was invented by German scientists 100 years ago. Because this technology is so costly, and many countries just gave up, developing and inputting energy and money. But China didn't give up and kept trying. And now China is the only country in the world that commercialized the high-speed magnetic navigation train technology, which is about 100-year-old German technology. So you see, this is a concrete one of million examples that how innovation could flourish in China, how the combination of European technology and Chinese implementation, the application can flourish in the giant market of the second largest population, that is China. So for the business, it's very relevant, the R&D, because business sectors is basically the major contributor of the R&D spending. This is the same case in both in Europe and China. So for instance, in 2020, the business enterprises, I think, accounted for 57.9% of the EU's R&D funding. And in China, this percentage is 77.5%. So you see what I want to make the message is that, if you look what's happening on the ground, it's important for the business point of view. Our appeal is that do not let the ideology trump technology, but make the innovation or cooperation prevail. I will stop here. Thank you.
Linlin, thank you. That was a really effective way of giving us that picture almost into the future, potentially, of where Beijing, because I know all of China is not like that, but how a city such as Beijing is transforming itself technologically, and the kind of experiences that you set out were really very quite interesting, lively and provocative, actually, in terms of thinking about how we might live our lives in the future. What I want to know from you is, are you hearing from company CEOs that this situation, this discussion about economic security is either improving their confidence, reducing their confidence? Are they going to be collaborating elsewhere rather than Europe? What's your take as a Chamber of Commerce from what you're hearing from your members?
Well, a lot of concerns, and I think at the moment, because it still needs some time to interpret what the economic security initiative strategy could be. We heard a lot, for instance, the essence of this strategy is that, for instance, the EU will tighten the FDI screening mechanism for the Chinese companies in the EU in the strategic critical sectors. On the other hand, it will also tighten the outbound investment of the European companies, their investment in high-tech sectors. In both ways, we don't think at the moment, it's constructed to promote the investment, because as you can see, the two-way investment actually has been on the trajectory of decreasing from both ways. So this is at the moment, we need the confidence boosted by both sides to increase rather than the other way around.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I'm going to open it up to our audience. And just to say, please raise your hand in the typical usual manner, which is to go to the participants icon, putting and virtually press so that I can hear you, and watch, the rest of the audience can also hear you and actually see you. So put your screen on, and if you have a question, I know that we already have one, and that's Christoph Elliot. Can you hear me?
I do.
Hello. Welcome. Please tell us what your question or comment is. You're muted.
Hi there.
Hi.
Good morning.
Morning. Thank you for joining us, Christoph. You are from, where are you? Are you from a company, organization?
I'm from the University of Hamburg. I'm Deputy Director International. Hi there.
Welcome.
I had you asked me because I asked a question, and the
Yes.
question and answers. And then the question is towards Ms. Russo, and thanks a lot for painting the pictures where we're heading. Well, we were reading a lot of information on press coming out and really dissecting how universities in Europe are collaborating with Chinese institutions with strong military links. And there were a number of press articles coming out really pointing out to highly problematic institutions like the Seven Sons of National Defense in China, and pointing out that European funding is going into collaborative projects with these highly problematic institutions, for example, in the Marie Curie scheme. My question is, will you stop that in the future?
And Christoph, tell me, is this, has this, this momentum that Maria Cristina presented, it's been going for about over a decade, affected your collaborative potential with universities in China? I mean, from my experience, I know that, at least in the past 20 years, a lot of universities, and my experience is predominantly the UK, basically, because of economic reasons, opened campuses in Shanghai and Beijing and created, degree opportunities both in Scotland, England, and China. And I'm not sure the rate of that, whether that's kind of been reduced now because of this situation. But tell us, from your perspective, is this affecting your confidence or your ability to collaborate with Chinese universities?
Now, I mean, a lot of the collaboration is going on bottom up in institutions. I mean, we do not clear every collaboration we have in a very large university. But of course, since there's pressure from inside, but also from the outside, from the policymakers, we do due diligence on whom we are cooperating with. And that's fair enough from policymakers to ask universities to do that. I think we should go hand in hand with funding organizations, because on the national, but also on the European level, a lot is being said, you universities, you do due diligence. But I think also funding organizations have to do due diligence and see which applications are coming in and what are Chinese partners. We have a lot of collaborations going on with, public, big Chinese research universities or research-focused universities, which are totally fine. And we have many of them, but there's also a number of collaborations with institutions that are problematic, to say the least. And I think it would be fair also to ask from funding organizations to have a hard look on those collaborations.
And so, Christoph, so what you're saying is that we need to have a better sense of signal from, let's say, Horizon and other funders about, do not do business with these characters or institutions. And so, I mean, Maria Cristina, what's your response to that? Thank you very much for joining us, by the way, Christoph.
Thank you very much. I really welcome Christoph's participation, question, and also remarks, because they really go in the sense of what I said beforehand and what we're trying to do. So on the specific case that Christoph mentioned, indeed, there were some financing under the Marie Sklodowska-Curie Action Program, which is a bottom-up program. I can give a bureaucratic reply to Christoph, which is the one that also was in the line to take for the press, that indeed those actions go to an ethical screening and the security appraisal process. From a point of view of the measures in place, the financing had followed the procedure, and so there is not an issue either legal or administrative. Having said that, indeed, Christoph, as you said, this is a question of a due diligence, and that also is on the side of the universities to see with whom they want to cooperate or not. But there, I assume my responsibility as a policymaker or contributing to policymaker, because of course we cannot just say it is up to the universities, they have to do that. And we have taken this in our hands in the European Union. We have organized all the work with our member states, with our university, which in fact led to the adoption of a staff working document on tackling foreign interference, which is state agnostic. It's not only for China, but it's in general for cooperation with international cooperation, which in fact respects on one way, of course, the autonomy of the universities, but on the other side is intended to raise awareness among the EU universities and research organizations on potential risks that emerge from international cooperation, and also to increase cooperation amongst different member states, universities, stakeholder organization on possible risks, possible solutions. And these are guidelines that we have indeed published in January 2022. And it is also an element that contributes to our policy towards China, although the guidelines are state agnostic. And in light of this economic security strategy, we are reviewing the different elements, including that. But let me also say something in this debate. I mean, we are fully aware of the importance of China in terms of innovation, but it's not like, I mean, there is a responsibility of China too. I mean, it takes two to tango in life. It takes two to cooperate. So I would like to repeat that we, as European Union, in research and innovation, we have really offered a discussion for having in place the framework conditions for cooperation, and we are very willing to move ahead in order to find a balanced situation. But I mean, the responsibility is also on China to respond to us and to move ahead into what we both consider a level playing field, which is respectful to both the interests of the European Union and China. And that is important for me to highlight.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you for that. And I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions, but I'm going to pick people from the virtual audience actually to participate. And firstly, Freak, Jan, are you there? You're from the Dutch government? I know you're probably thinking, oh my goodness, he suddenly picked on me.
That's okay. Let me just figure out how to unmute myself.
You've unmuted, I can hear you. We can hear you.
That's
And just to put other people on notice, Claire Orovis, also from the US mission. I'd love to hear your perspective too, but let's start with Freak yourself first. I'd like you to give a comment on your perspective on what you're listening to and how this will affect your government's approach, if at all, in the context of collaboration and academic research and scientific research. You were there momentarily. You need to put your camera on if you don't mind.
Yeah, here I am.
Excellent.
Yes. So in a similar way, of course, we share many of the topics that have already been shared by Maria Russo. We consider collaboration with China to be, in science, technology, innovation, to be very important. And actually, we're currently in the process of working towards a new memorandum of understanding between the relevant ministries in the Netherlands and China to kind of shape our future collaboration in this space. And similar to, I think, the EU, we very much value the opportunity to collaborate with China on shared societal challenges. Right. And so those will be at the core, I think, of our joint agenda on science, technology, and innovation for the years to come. At the same time, we, of course, realize that our collaboration in this field takes place at a very different, geopolitical backdrop nowadays. And therefore, of course, we hope that the EU and China will also be able to make progress on the roadmap, which is, I think, at the core, of course, of collaboration in science, technology, and innovation, that you kind of agree on important values together, and that you ensure that there's mutual access in all the domains where you want to collaborate. So I think in that sense, I recognize many of the signals that have been made here, but I would also really like to reiterate, we have a strong partnership with China in this space, and we look forward to continued collaboration.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for coming in this unplanned manner. But, I will do that to those of you who are participating. It's great because you can't just, the whole point of this exercise is to actually use this virtual brain to engage in understanding what the implications are of where we find ourselves currently, but how we plan the future. As you said, it's really important. There are shared global challenges, and climate change is one of the most significant, and we actually need to make sure we link arms that to ensure that technology, especially scientific technological progress is something that we are bound together in achieving, so that we're able to do more to prevent and protect our planet. So on that note, before Claire, I'm just going to say to you, I'm going to bring in our next speaker before I bring you in, just to kind of let you know that you've got time, because I'll be asking you similarly, as I said earlier, that about what from your perspective, how might this regulation, this discussion affect US, EU, China scientific exchange research. Before I do that, I'm going to invite Yuzhuo, director of the Sino-Finnish Education Research Center. You're a senior lecturer and an adjunct professor. You've been involved in EU-China relations and research for a very long time. You've produced numerous books, articles, etc. Firstly, give us your reflection, as I've asked others, about where you find yourself in the context of this discussion about economic security that the Council of Europe is discussing today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you, Dharmendra, for the introduction and also inviting me to such an important timely event. I also appreciate the opportunity to learn from other experts, Maria, Cristina, Linlin, and Gianni. As I have 5 minutes to share my remarks, I try to be direct and to the point. So the EU is planning to create a new rulebook as the topic of the discussion. This is in response to the significant challenges in the field influenced by the shifting geopolitics and the ongoing crisis, obviously. So as we are facing the unprecedented challenges, policymakers, practitioners, in the universities, I know that the people are struggling to find the strategies and approaches to cope with the situation. So therefore, it's crucial to have the rulebook as a guideline for continue the science cooperation between both sides, regardless of challenges. However, designing such a rulebook is not an easy task. To better prepare it, there is urgent need to understand, to fully understand with the deep knowledge about the evolving rationales and the logics underlying the EU-China science cooperation in the context of political and economic discourses. One of my ongoing studies addressing the issue and our preliminary findings indicate the logics driving EU-China science cooperation are changing dramatically, and also the logics driving EU and China for collaborating with the counterpart are becoming very complex. So we basically observe a combination of 3 logics: science logic, economic logics, and the political logics at play. And the recent changes reflect the increasing influence of political logics and increasing incompatibility of driving forces between EU and China. So this is a problem very much in contrast to the period before 2019, in which the primary logics on both sides are mainly focused on science and economic dimensions. And also there's a high level compatibility of drivers for collaboration. So there's a significant chance to address the challenges. Traditional approaches for collaboration won't be sufficient, and innovative solutions need to be developed. So from the institutional logic perspectives, the new solutions must help reconcile different logics on the one hand, and leverage multiple and even competing logics for innovation on the other. So to this end, it's important to link EU-China cooperation in different sectors driven by different logics. For example, bring public and private sector together and fostering collaboration among universities, industries, and governments. Now I want to highlight something based on my recent study is about the significant role of EU-China university collaboration in facilitating science technology innovation cooperation in the private sector, meaning the industry or business actors. So my study suggests international university collaboration can significantly contribute to the industry collaboration by forming a network. I call it a transnational university industry co-innovation network. So by forming such network, the university collaboration can not only support industry collaboration, but can to large extent turn the challenges in the cooperation into the opportunities. For instance, this include matching suitable partners for business and building trust between business actors through university linkages, and giving industry actors access to new resources, and also enhancing the reputation of international companies in China, and most importantly, to create innovative business cooperation models to cope with the challenges. So now coming back to the rulebook, I think is very important. Of course, the rulebook must be very comprehensive, but regarding what I'm just have highlighted about the integration between the science cooperation and the industry cooperation, I think a few things can be considered. One is to facilitate the dialogues and coordinations between EU-China science cooperation and the industry cooperation on the policy level or at the system level, and enhancing the communication and the interactions between the European universities and the companies within the same country or even the region to jointly develop strategies to engage with China. And then another example is to envision innovative services offered by the governmental agencies or the publicly funded projects to fully utilize the university collaboration in industry collaboration, because in the past 40 years, Europe has invested a huge amount of resources to build the trust and the science collaboration. We should leverage, also harvest the outcome in this critical moment. So finally, I want to highlight another thing is, although I fully support the guideline, the rule book, which would be fundamental, but only having the rule book alone won't resolve all the challenges at the organizational and individual level. So we also equally needs the universities, industries, organizations, individuals to come up, bottom-up initiative, to distill the lessons and the best practices from the ongoing activities, because we do not know how to cope with the situation, but we can do is to share the best practices, the lessons, and collectively to address the challenge. Thank you very much.
Yuzhuo, thank you very much. That's very effective, very clear, and optimistic, but also signaling where there might be scope and moments for overcoming the lack of trust, or actually how to build trust better. We heard from Maria Cristina saying it takes two to tango, okay? And so, okay, this is coming out from the EU as a strategy. What do you think China needs to do to signal greater improved trust so that both regions are able to get a sense of a dynamic that's moving in the right direction rather than pulling apart?
Yeah, thank you. That's a really important question. I fully agree. The core of the cooperation to cope with the challenges is how to maintain and build the trust. I can see, the efforts from EU side, but since you asked me, about my observation on what's going on in China in terms of building the trust, I can give you an example. So currently, I'm not in Finland, I'm in Barcelona. So I'm taking I'm attending the Triple Helix conference about the university, industry, governmental collaboration for innovation. And in this conference, we organized a side event. It's called the EU-China Innovation Forum. So the organizer of the forum was Triple Helix Association, and one association from China, one powerful association is called Chinese Science and Science Technology Policy, very long name. But basically this association has 1,000 or 2,000 members, including all the leading institutions or leading scholars in the field of science, technology, and innovation. So I think this is a sign showing, on both sides, on both EU side and the Chinese side, they want to have the dialogue. So I think that one problem, for building the trust on both sides, probably is because of the pandemic. Because when you are building the trust, it's not only about the policy dialogues, nice work. You really need to have the people-to-people dialogues at the individual level. People must meet in person. Because I observe, the atmosphere, when the Chinese delegation come here to the conference with the majority participants from Europe, they have really nice discussion. And also I can observe the trust, in a way, have developed through the I can see the side event of the conference through having the chat, having the dinner, having fun, having drinks. So we really need to have the individual level collaborations. I think China, in a way, want to maintain the EU collaboration, especially in the science and technology, because China has very tense situation with the US, and basically Europe is the one China prefer to continue the collaboration.
Good to hear. Good to hear. We'll come back to you during the longer chat that we have. But as again, I want to remind our participants, please do engage. Use your virtual hand to signal your desire to come in, and or use the chat to comment on what you're hearing and listening to in this conversation. I'm going to swiftly move on to Gianni. Gianni, thank you for joining us. It's a great pleasure to have you also with us, and especially because you represent a sector or an area of cooperation that's key, especially in this current environment we find ourselves in. You're the Vice Chair of the International Consortium for Personalised Medicine and Head of Project Management Office at Toscana Life Sciences. First, what I'd like you to set out for us, Gianni, is why do you think it's critical or important to maintain the kind of relationship and cooperation that you have already instigated between Europe and China on issues that you're specializing in?
Yep. So first of all, allow me to thank you for the invitation, and would like to say good morning and good afternoon to everyone that are joining this event. The answer to your question, it might sound easy and somehow taken for granted, but what also based on what the COVID pandemic has taught us, maintaining the international collaboration among potentially the whole globe, but specifically with China, is of utmost importance to improve the health and improve the care capacity of our systems for the benefit of patients and citizens. We have, I come here with the hat of Vice Chair of the International Consortium for Personalized Medicine, and also as a participant of another initiative launched by the European Commission, which is the Sino-EU project, which is a specific project funded by the European Commission to understand the current barriers for collaboration between Europe and China on health research in general, and particularly on personalized medicine and precision medicine. Now, the importance of collaboration, the importance also to maintain a dialogue is also relevant for one particular reason. Research, luckily, is more and more based and driven by ethical principles. And these ethical principles are embedded in our societies. So we need to collaborate. We need to pursue the dialogue, also to make sure that we communicate, that we exchange ideas, that the other party is very well aware, and we are very well aware of the ethical principles that drive the counterpart research. Having said that, I would like to bring to the attention of this audience two particular initiatives. One is related to the CCCEU project, which is this project that has been funded by the European Commission. In this project, we have actually mapped all the collaboration between Europe and China, all the industrial collaboration between Europe and China. We have, with the help of experts from both Europe and China, we have assessed which are the main barriers related to collaboration between Europe and China. There is a scientific paper that has been published, and also a policy paper which is being prepared, which specifically tackles the barriers that jeopardize collaboration between the two areas. And we also had a bilateral workshop last year here in Florence, where we tried to understand better the barriers, which specifically are regulatory barriers, because, as I said, the regulatory is driven also by ethics, and the way the ethical principles are including the European research might be different than how it's including the Chinese research. So having done that, we also, and I would like to stress the importance of the words that Dr. Kai just said, we also organized delegation meetings from Chinese experts in Europe last April, and now we are planning a new delegation visit from European experts which go to China, so we can sit with the decision maker. We can sit from decision maker, yes, from universities, industries, and we can continue this collaboration. We can continue this dialogue and maintain the research collaboration alive. On the other side, the second initiative I would like to share with the audience is connected to the International Consortium for Personalized Medicine, and is also an initiative that the European Commission is really investing a lot on, which is the European Partnership for Personalized Medicine, which will be the biggest public-private partnership on health research with a particular focus on personalized medicine. It's based on 5 different pillars. One of the most important pillars, it is indeed the international collaboration. So what we have been doing, what the European Commission has been investing on is also, and this is another proof on the collaboration at the international scale, but more precisely with the European and China, because we believe that keeping this collaboration alive will bring enormous benefit for European, Chinese, but for the global players together.
Gianni, thank you. I mean, how much longer have you got on this partnership that's you just spoke about, in terms, which seems really significant in terms of collaborating on personalized healthcare and medicine? How many more years have you got left, or has it just started?
Well, this is the nice thing. The European Partnership is an initiative that the European Commission has launched. They are still evaluating the project, the proposal right now, and if approved, the European Partnership will actually start this autumn at the end of the year and will last for at least 7 to 10 years. There will be 7 years of activities and then 3 years of let's say phasing out part. So it is something that it's going to be very fresh, because as I said, the European Commission is still evaluating and launching it, and it will run for the next year. So it is something on which we can really, it's something that we can really leverage to promote, to reinforce dialogue and collaboration among the two regions.
Great. And have you witnessed at the moment, I mean, from your perspective so far, you're meeting people across the globe, especially from the Asia and China, etc. Do you think, I mean, how do you think let's say the council that's meeting today should think about or prepare or signal the importance and or the security issues around sovereignty that may or may not affect your collaborative potential with universities and others?
First of all, I would like to say that in this exchange that we have been organizing, there is a lot of openness to collaborate. We have had Chinese stakeholders who wanted to invest, and they are trying to invest on research on bilateral scale, also with the single organization, because they really think that they really believe in this kind of activities. How to ensure that this is run on a fair scale and no interest is jeopardized is, first of all, by building competencies in universities and research centers. And this is something that, for example, in our research centers, we have been doing. So we are well aware of the European strategies. We are well aware of assessing IP. We are well aware of assessing security issues, and so on and so forth. So we have these competencies built within our centers, and I think this is something that everyone should somehow promote, so we can actually approach this kind of collaboration request with a higher level of awareness, having in mind specifically which are our interests as a research center, but also the interest of the European Union, and between the two levels, regional and also national level interest. So this is from a researcher point of view. This is the how we are tackling it.
Gianni, thank you so much. I want to go back to our participants. I know there's a question which I'll read out in a moment from Alice, but I want to go if Claire, you're still there, Claire Orvis from the US mission. If you're happy to chip into the debate, that would be really helpful.
I am, and I apologize. I unfortunately can't use my camera, but it is lovely to see you all, and delighted to be invited to attend, and then as a surprise to participate. I just want to clarify a little bit, because I think most folks know kind of U.S. concerns when it comes to some of these, and I want to clarify them a lot, because we've heard some really excellent perspectives. I appreciate following Dr. Tsai to hear his take and to talk about building trust. And I think the trust thing is one of the things that we find concerning, and I want to explain a little bit of why. The PRC is one of the only countries in the world that has a civilian military strategy. There is text in PRC government documents that would, and in national security laws that requires that any PRC firm, any university, any company could be compelled to turn over a whole host of information to the military should it need that, right? There's no other country that has something like that. So while I think we trust that in most situations that wouldn't be a thing that we would see authorities in Beijing or in other places pursue, the fact that the laws exist is something that denigrates trust on our side. It's also, I think, one of the things that we're in conversations with our European partners about, because we see that largely as a privacy issue as well, right? And if you look at European privacy concerns, privacy regulations, there are so many requirements there for private firms and for governments to protect that we see that as kind of a vulnerability. I want to make a couple of points in terms of the scope of kind of U.S. limitations when it comes to scientific collaborations. I want to note that they're really quite limited. I am not, I mean, I'm a government policymaker. I'm not an expert on academic research, but the ones who are, I would say, is Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And at MIT, they published a research paper last November that indicates their plan going forward on how they're going to continue to collaborate with Chinese counterparts. If you look at universities across the United States, you see tons of collaboration ongoing. And you see MIT and other universities who are committed to maintaining that, to keeping up their deep levels of communication, their decades-long cooperation. But it lays out kind of how they want to monitor that to make sure that it doesn't become threatened by a lack of trust or by vulnerabilities related to the PRC's civilian military fusion requirements. I also wanted to mention on the trust front, one of the things that we see difficulty with in the last 2 years, and I am so grateful that we have the Chinese Chamber of Commerce here. I would have loved to have also seen the EU Chamber of Commerce here, is that we're increasingly seeing instances where the PRC, intentionally or unintentionally, is contributing to a lack of trust because of raids or of operational hindrances on companies and firms and auditors who are attempting to do due diligence issues. So further to Dr. Tsai's point, I would like to highlight that and to say, you know, the more transparent we can be about everything related to due diligence, whether that's supply chains, whether that's research, whether that's findings, that will also help to ensure that when we look at all of this through a national security lens, it remains very narrow in scope and fully related to ongoing national security issues, and it doesn't it doesn't hinder those broader collaboration things that are so important for all of us to work on shared global challenges. So I would fully support Dr. Tsai's comments and really highlight the need for greater transparency. I would say on both sides of the Atlantic, we're working on that, and we'd love to see it from the Pacific as well. Thanks.
Claire, thank you so much for kind of stepping in, unexpectedly, and giving us such clarity and thoughtfulness, and sharing with us your insights. And you're quite right, Claire. The marketplace of collaboration amongst universities seems to be thriving, seems to be continuing, but you're picking up a noise from certain sectors that actually this might not be as buoyant as it has been in the past 20 years. But as you say, in the context of the shared global challenges we face, I think we'll find centers of excellence that will continue to try and maintain collaborative practices, because we all know that actually out of that will come greater solutions, better areas for preventative action, and heaven forbid that if we were to have another pandemic in a year's time, let's hope that the conversations we're having right now don't prevent the kind of sharing that we saw in the early months of the pandemic about science, technology, being able to understand the nature of the virus in various ways, and the sharing of that knowledge and science. And I hope that we can build from that experience and make sure we don't undermine it or go backwards in time. But you're right, trust requires transparency and accountability on all sides. It's a point well made. I want to go to the question that Alice, you've been very patient with me. You're from the French Institute of International Relations, I believe. And your question is to Maria Cristina. Maria, what Alice would like to know is, what kind of assessment is there of Chinese investment into the EU in terms of research? And so, what is the kind of tool that is being used on FDI, let's say, in relation to research and innovation? Is there a more coherent sense of how you try and use the different tools to monitor FDI from China in the research, science and technology broadly, that sector? Maria Cristina, over to you.
Thank you very much. If you allow me, I also would like to pick up a bit on the conversation that took place before.
Please do. Please do.
Very briefly on the fact that, it would be nice to have also the European Union Chamber of Commerce in China here to this discussion. And let me say there that, for example, linked to the framework conditions for cooperation that I mentioned earlier on. For example, there was a survey which was done last year, which said that 46% of respondents think that enforcement of China's IP protection law is still inadequate and does not provide for the European industries the guarantees that are necessary. So that is something that I wanted to say. It's important to bring the perspectives here. And now, to reply to your question, we are mapping the different instruments that are in place, or we are mapping their effectiveness towards China, and including, the foreign investment that China is doing directly to the European Union. And if there is an important element of this strategy that the European Commission adopted last week, the European Economic Security Strategy, which will be discussed at the European Council, is indeed to have a bit more coherence in the different instruments that are in place, in order to have what in French would say a better view d'ensemble to what exists for tackling the challenges. So we are working on that in fine-tuning our instruments and creating more synergies amongst all of them.
Great, thank you very much. I want to again encourage people to raise their hands. Any issues or other questions or comments you might have on this discussion. And I suppose I suppose what we would like to understand, I suppose from all of you, if you've got a view, and particularly obviously yourself, Maria Cristina, is that how do we get all EU member states on the same page? Because I mean, that's going to be a key issue, isn't it? Because you are going to see variation. And, you know, I remember that when we had one of our EU-China dialogues last year, and one of the entrepreneurs that was there, a very well-known entrepreneur in China, and said that, you know, there isn't a single rule book for the EU because, you know, some of the Eastern European states let us in easily and without any question. But yet in other parts of the EU, let's say, for example, France or Germany, we've got a very different approach. And therefore, there isn't a single approach to China investment and collaboration, and there's no coherence. Obviously, it's difficult, but I'm not going to answer the question for you. Give us your view on how do you address that, the fact that the council is meeting, but we also know there are differences of opinion in the council also.
Thank you very much. I mean, this is really a key question that is important to highlight, you know. And also, I wanted to reflecting on what our colleagues from the Netherlands said. I mean, the European Union is the EU is done by the European institutions and its member states. So, I mean, the approach of the European Union is the one of in the Commission, of course, endorsed by the Parliament Council with the member states. And it's really important that we work in synergy with a coherent, you know, point of view. And we are doing that. We are doing that. Not later than last week, I participated to a meeting of the Directors-General for Research and Innovation of all the EU member states, which took place, which was organized by the current Swedish presidency of the Council of the European Union. And indeed, we discussed the approach toward China in the field of science, technology, and innovation with the really intention to create synergies in what we're doing and to work together towards the common policy objectives, which, let me repeat, are also to continue to work with China in the field of mutual interest. And our colleague Gianni, who was here, explained how much the EU is doing on important issues such as health and personalized medicines, but also to really work hand in hand in order to have a common approach on those areas where we need to be more restrictive from a point of view of safeguarding the EU interest. This discussion that we had last week at the level of the Directors General of Research and Innovation will be certainly followed up, and it is also based on a group that we have set in place, which is composed by the European institutions, the member states representatives, and some key stakeholder organization on really discussing together the situation with China, the situation in terms of science, innovation, and the steps that have to be undertaken. So this is something that we are doing. We are working on that. And let me also add that, of course, the European Union has a delegation in Beijing. In this delegation, we have a science counselor who is working under with the ambassador, and he is also coordinating from Beijing the approach of the different member states to specific discussions with the other science counselors. And what I'm saying here is that, as you know, research and innovation is a shared competence between the EU and member states. So we are not replacing the member states, but we are really working in order to create those synergies which are necessary in order to have impact. And we're doing that really also with a strong demand of member states that are asking for that.
Great, thank you very much. I was looking down because we've had someone on our live stream. It's Philip Brugner. He's representing the Center for Social Innovation in Vienna. Thank you for joining us on the live stream, but I know that you're not able to raise your hand as a result. I suppose you are again, I suppose, making that point about how to get all member states in line, or rather taking a coherent approach. But you said, about hearing the Dutch example in the Netherlands on the topic, but what about a country like Poland? for example. So, how do you make sure that Poland and Hungary play by the rules of the book, if you like, or the rules of the game? So, Maria, Cristina, before I bring you back, I just want to make sure if there's any other people in the audience, virtual or otherwise, would like to comment. I know that we've got someone from University of Munich. So Birgit, if you don't mind, I want to bring you in to have your view before I go back to Maria Cristina. But I also bring in both Linlin and Yuzhuo again before we conclude this debate, which we've only got about 11 minutes to go. But Birgit, are you happy to come in and give your perspective?
So, may I?
Yeah.
Okay. So I just want to take the opportunity to reflect again on the trust issues raised by Clary. I think it's very important. I want to actually, I am writing an article. It's not a scientific article, but a very practical short pieces just to elaborate, what caused the trust problem. So I want to share a few essential points I found. So one is, there on the EU and China side, actually, there is basically a misconception. Misconception includes several dimensions. I'll just give you an example. For instance, the Clary mentioned that when reading the People Republic China's policies, so, those actors working in the science technology a little bit, scary or concerned about many things. But I want to say that somehow in China, the misperception is we assume as Europeans or Western people that China is an authoritarian system. So basically, the political discourses tightly, intertwine with science technology at the individual level. I think to some extent it's true, because China is centrally controlled. But regarding especially the EU cooperation, it's very loosely coupled. I want to make this point. But if you want to watch the media, you can see, for example, once we have some EU-China dialogues, high-level meetings, the media report send a different message. In Europe, everything, the language is around, de-risking, security, freedom, etc., basically reflect the EU document. But in Chinese media, what Chinese academics or science actors received is different. Basically, the harsh languages were filtered out. So the Chinese academics still get the feeling the government encouraging them to go to Europe, want to collaborate. Basically, this is something I have observed is very interesting. So this story is different to US. But in US, the top and the bottom languages though somehow are more closely linked, but on the EU side they are loosely coupled. I think this is something I think is worth paying attention. That's also showing some signal, and also the misassumption is also somehow related. I think the transparency issue, because sometimes this unbalanced, information, I think it's very important in the organizational level, individual collaboration level. We should make this transparent. I think it's also important for Chinese actors, individuals, to actually know what's going on in Europe, because only when you know the situation, be transparent, then you can come up, with a solution. Otherwise, if the information is not synchronized, you have, basically different perception, different understandings, then you just, increase the chance to have further misunderstanding of each other. I just want to share some of my observations I found that might be useful for further thinking. Thank you very much.
No, Yuzhuo, thank you very much. It's really helpful. It's really helpful. And you really, I mean, it's been ever thus that when there are tensions, how partners or the third countries are portrayed in our respective media, and it's ever thus, and somehow we need to move beyond that or be able to read between the lines. But as you said previously, your point is really well made. Only by sitting together, breaking bread, talking about problems, being around the table, but confronting the fact that, you know, where there are areas of concern, as Claire mentioned about certain regulations, open up that space for dialogue. And what does that mean for collaboration? That doesn't mean you stop, but just recognizing the limits of what you can do. So it's very important points you're making. Thank you. Before I go back to Maria for concluding remarks, because we've only got 7-8 minutes left, Linlin, I want to bring you back in and for you to reflect on what you've heard. And, you know, I suppose, what message do you want to give to the, you know, businesses in Europe, but also government? What is it you'd like them to leave this debate with from your perspective, Linlin?
Thank you so much. Just one point, because I think Maria, Cristina, and Claire also mentioned EU CCC. Actually, we maintain very frequent exchange with our counterpart in China, the EU CCC. We exchange a lot about the business environment, both in China and Europe. So yes, our message to the governmental sectors is that from the business point of view, we do agree, we do believe that China and the EU are highly intertwined in trade and could be very complementary to each other with regard to R&D. So just like the Chinese solar panels and its components, the smart solar panels and components cannot function very well without the European chips. So in some cases, that competition from China facilitates innovation, just like Tesla can develop better with the Chinese competition, like their competitor like BYD. So in the globalized manufacturing and innovation chain, China and Europe need each other. And China is absolutely not the risk, but the opportunity. This is the message we would like to extend to the governmental sector. Please provide us with the more, you know, opener, fairer access to cutting-edge technologies, rather than fragment the global tech markets and overstretch the concept of economic security. By working together, China and Europe can achieve better and more. That is the basic message from the business sector. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Linlin. Finally, over to yourself, Maria, Cristina, to kind of share with us your thinking about what might come out of today, especially because we know, so on the one hand, we know the differences in the council about some of these issues. So among certain member states, so there's that dimension. What do you see is likely to come out of today? A second point is that, you know, in this shared global challenge we have about the pace of climate change on our lives, we're seeing it already, Maria, because you know that it's been, you know, people are going to say already it's the hottest month, hottest day ever recorded. We know that already because we've seen how temperatures and the El Nino effect taking shape and impact on our lives. We know that China has just announced that, you know, it has this new cell generator for solar energy, which can be transformative, absolutely transformative. And we all need the energy. We all need energy because at the moment we're going through a crisis. So how do we make sure that on certain areas like that, we're able to really excel the collaboration so we can bring it to market across the piece? And I suppose the final point, Maria Cristina, for me is the new MFF. Do you see, and this is a strategic point, this is not about EU-China relations, this is more about Europe and its claim for sovereignty. When you compare the ratio of R&D to GDP in Europe in comparison to Japan, South Korea, the United States, and China, we're like, you know, down the scale, if you like, in terms of percentages. Do you see, and we can see that there's a correlation between how much you spend of GDP on R&D and the economic powerhouse you can become? Do you think there'll be a change in the percentage of what we spend in Europe or in the MFF to increase R&D spend? A lot of questions, I know, but I think
yes,
those are the things
especially that we have
mind.
2 minutes for answering, because in fact, one of your questions, what will come out of today? I mean, I, of course, cannot replace the heads of states of government that will start the discussion at the moment when we finish them. But certainly, what I would like to say is that I mean the European Council is to adopt specific conclusions both on China and on the economic security strategy, and with the idea on China of fine-tuning the strategy that we have developed, also based on the speech of the president that was delivered before a visit to China, and on that, on the coherence between member states. Let me just add the specific point regarding to Poland and Hungary that you mentioned earlier on. We are very much aware of discussions with Poland and Hungary, notably on the rule of law issues. But I must say that in the work that we are doing on science and technology and innovation, we have Poland and Hungary fully on board. I just refer that also that we discussed last week. They are part of our group. So on our side, they are on board. So I think that important is that the European Council will make in its conclusions specific statements on how to move ahead with regards to China, with the idea again of de-risking, not decoupling, which is key, and also on the economic security strategy, on which are the next steps which are foreseen. There, as in all the compromises in everywhere in the world, including in the European Union, the language will reflect the nuances that one of the other member states would bring. But I think that from the preparatory work, there is a broad understanding and buying in on the need for the European Council to have a position on those important issues, which are also linked to the new MFF and to the question that you put forward in research and innovation. And there I must say that, I mean, we in the European Union, we have the biggest research and innovation program, multilateral program of the world. So, I mean, we have very, very powerful tool. Of course, that is something that is a plus to what the member states have, and the discussion it is taking place since many years on the fact that the member states should spend more in research and innovation, and that would be very, very helpful. But in the European Union, in terms of spending, research and innovation as a big part of the budget, and also in the new in the proposal for the revision of the MFF, which was adopted last week, which will also be brought to the European Council. There is this new step mechanism that would mobilize 160 billion of euros for technologies related really to deep tech, climate technology, plus 10 million of additional one with the mechanism I will not explain now, we don't have time, which creates more synergies also on amongst the programs that exist. So this is dealt also within those discussions in the European Council among the chapter of promoting of the European economic strategy, security strategy. Let me conclude, because we already passed the 12 o'clock deadline, by saying that on climate change, you mentioned climate change, and it is really something important for us, important to work with China on climate change, because it's a subject of mutual interest. Hence, we have developed a specific flagship on climate change and biodiversity, which we have launched last year, and which we hope will bring fruits for our researchers, for our society, and for our cooperation based on mutual interest and adequate framework conditions. I conclude by saying that we want to continue to cooperate with China on mutual interest, having a level playing field. And speaking about the rule book, that the rule book is being written since some time, and now it needs to be refined in line with the economic security strategy in order to tackle in an adequate way the de-risking aspect. Thank you very much.
Maria Cristina, thank you. Very well put, and kind of a nice kind of tying up of the loop where we started with you. I want to thank all our participants, virtual and those oral who are listening as opposed to just watching. I want to thank our speakers. Thank you all four of you for spending 90 minutes with us. on this very topical issue. One, we shouldn't underestimate that science and technology and research and knowledge sharing are the bedrock of social progress, not only in one country, but across the world. And we have to realize that our challenges that are coming ahead of us, not only in the long term, but in the near term, are shared. They are borderless. They'll affect whole populations. So the more we're able to achieve common good in excelling on science and technology and knowledge sharing and making sure that we are able to have secure livelihoods and prosperous livelihoods is going to be key. And part of that is understanding the shared sense of purpose that we need to have, notwithstanding the issues of trust, but also concerns around security. Thank you all. I hope that this conversation continues. Keep an eye on our website for other events of this type. Also in the autumn, we'll be having a major conversation very much along the lines of how does Europe and China and Asia more broadly cooperate on the challenges that are ahead of us in the world. Thank you all very much and see you again. Take care and tune in on our next next event, which is coming up very soon. Take care. Thank you very much and look after yourselves and see you very soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Recording stopped.